CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. Thank you for tuning in. Today, we've got a returning guest. It's Paul Lachance. You've seen him on CMMS Radio before, and if you haven't, you're about to meet him, and we're going to have a really cool conversation because he's been a part of this space for at least a couple of decades. He stays plugged into it. He tries to keep an eye on everything. He's got a lot to offer us as far as insights, guidance, and what this whole thing is all about. Like, where did it start? We're going to talk about CMMS. We're going to talk about EAM, which we don't do very often on CMMS Radio, but it's part of it. And then we're going to talk about some other cool stuff. So first of all, Paul Lachance, welcome back to CMMS Radio.
Greg, thank you so much. It's always awesome to be talking to you.
I really appreciate that. And I think, whenever we schedule these or if we have a meeting that we don't record, I get excited because we get to talk about things from both a similar perspective and a very different perspective in how we come from different parts of the same industry, but then you've got all these other insights that, I haven't had much of, and I think it's really valuable for everybody. Plus, the energy is awesome. So I'm very thankful when you join me. And
I'm thankful that we have CMMS Radio, and I'm thankful that we have this platform for this amazing industry with all these amazing companies that's really making a difference for not only manufacturing and industrial organizations, but really any place that has maintenance staff. So it's CMMS Radio. I'm a big fan.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. I appreciate it. When I say we, I'm talking me, myself, and I. So just for those folks that might not have heard of you or checked out your previous episodes with me or anybody else, can you give us kind of a brief history of you, of Paul Lachance?
Sure. I've been I started as a software developer right out of college in the 80s and actually wrote my first CMMS system in DOS in the early 90s. So I have been around this sector for many decades and seen a lot. I've actually built up two different software companies, the second of which went by the name in the industry it was called Smartware Group. Our product was Bigfoot CMMS in the space. And had just a wonderful time growing that company. We talked about that in detail in the previous episode. But I built up that company and ultimately was fortunate to be acquired by a company back then by the name of Dude Solutions. Most people know Dude Solutions. Now they're Brightly Software. Everybody knows them as Brightly Software. So I was fortunate to have my product, which was called Bigfoot CMMS back then. They renamed it to Asset Essentials. And just enjoyed a wonderful ride with the folks at Brightly. And that culminated just about almost 2 years ago now with an acquisition by Siemens. So I've seen my little Bigfoot, I say a funny name, Little Bigfoot here, grow up into be this global Siemens platform. And as you said, I've stayed connected in the industry. I've gone on to do consulting, and I'll talk more about that later in the conversation, but I just spend my time now studying technology trends, macroeconomic trends, where the industry is moving. And you can learn a lot from the past, which is a big part of our conversation today, the industrial revolutions. But there's a lot of things we can learn, and it's telling us about where the future is going, both for CMMS and the sector in general.
Yeah, so when we talk about that, big picture, where we're going, where we are now, and where we came from. And I like to pay attention to all of that. I think it's important to kind of remember and honor the past, learn from it. And you already mentioned that this is a really great industry with lots of great companies. And there's different ways to look at how companies are delivering their technologies, supporting their clientele. But I want to have you tell us a little bit about how the various industrial revolutions kind of unfolded, and then how that takes us into these advancements with EAM and or CMMS. Personally, I've said it recently where CMMS, EAM, which is which, where do they fall? and we can wrestle with that one later. But if you give us your take on the industrial revolutions, we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4, and arguably heading into 5, and then get us into how that relates to and translates into the world of EAM and CMMS.
I love history personally, and I know we can learn from history. Why don't I just I'm going to take us down a walk of memory lane before we were born. And, we are living in the fourth industrial revolution right now. People often just call it Industry 4.0. But if you think back, the first industrial revolution was back in the late 1700s. And 1784 is a number. I don't know who came up with that number, that date. But it was with every industrial revolution, it started with a technology shift. Everyone, all four, and will be the fifth. Back then in the late 1700s, it was when we started to find mechanization. So we were able to harness things like steam, water. We no longer had to use our human muscles or beasts of burden to do the work for us. And it really changed the way we were able to produce things. So one of the first examples here in the US was Samuel Slater's water-powered cotton mill, which was a textile production facility. It was in Rhode Island. And it revolutionized because they were able to produce their goods at rates that were never seen before on US soils. Actually, Samuel Slater did go over to Europe, England, and took some of his ideas and brought him back. So it was already getting started there. But this created a societal impact where we had a rapid increase in production capabilities of making goods because of this revolution. About 100 years later, we got into the second industrial revolution. And that was technically started in the late 1800s, 1870, and that was mass production. So you think of things like the assembly line, and it was greatly aided with this new thing called electricity. So, a lot of people think of Henry Ford, the Model T production line, which was the sort of the father of the assembly line or the production process. It actually happened sooner than that. There were various forms of mass production and various goods, but it really did take off with the automobile manufacturing in this country. And while Henry Ford is often credited, it was actually Ransom E. Olds, i.e. the Oldsmobile, who created the first real assembly line process for his curved dash model. This is back in 1902. And so his approach of this progressive assembly line, it really set the stage for mass production across all kinds of industries. And actually, interestingly enough, Olds, back when he first was getting going, he had a major fire in his one factory that almost took him completely out of business. But he was smart. He created this very early generation of the supplier system where he kind of built different components in different places so it didn't ruin him. And that's a process we still use today, especially in the automobile industry, where you're having assemblies made in different places, or components made in different places and then assembled. So Ransom Olds was really should be credited with the beginnings of that. And that in our society changed a lot of things. I mean, now we started to find affordable goods and products from automobiles, as we're talking about, but also things like furniture and food and just any sort of devices that were only be afforded by the real rich. The regular people started to see these things. Again, it seems simple today, the assembly line, but it was a major technology shift that introduced that. That led us to the third industrial revolution, which was in the late 1960s. And this is where we're starting to see things happen a lot quicker. The third industrial revolution was much more about robotics and automation, aided with, in the 60s, it was very early generation, but computers. So this was a time where, and this is where I have memories of those first early generation computers. The first one that got all kinds of press, and this was actually before I was even born, was called the Unimate. And it was, I think it was General Motors. It was using this on their automobile assembly line. It was a social media, before there was social media star, the Unimate. Johnny Carson. I remember the Johnny Carson show. The younger readers will have no idea who we're talking about, but had the Unimate, this robot on his program. It was hitting a golf ball. There's pictures of this robot pouring a glass of beer. It was a cultural phenomenon when that first came out. But the combination of these electronics and robots, including things like PLCs, programmable logic controllers, and other factory automation, major technology change that changed the way factories operate, and we're able to do, safer for the workers to do things because the robots could handle those more challenging things, and it really increased the production and capabilities. That brings us up to the fourth industrial revolution, where we're living today. And so 2010 is the date that I see often cited where the fourth industrial revolution was started. Now, this is where we start to see the major technology change. There is the interconnected nature of everything. So this is where you have the intersection of the digital and the physical world, IoT sensors, the ability to harness data off our shop floors through smart assets, or even older generation assets that you could reapply these sensors on. And using that data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, to start to do amazing things with this data. So you start to hear things like predictive analytics, predictive maintenance, prescriptive maintenance. AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning are a key component of this fourth industrial revolution. And so this industrial revolution, while it's a lot more on the digital than the physical side of those first revolutions, it's changed everyday life for everybody. I mean, the way we operate, mobile devices, cloud-based computing, and the interconnected nature of everything. Here we are talking across 2,500 miles apart in this country, and having this conversation is all thanks to this fourth industrial revolution. But again, with every single one of these, it's just exciting technology changes, which that have just brought change and for the better. And certainly in that sort of manufacturing and industrial sector, where CMMS is a big part, these changes were profound.
So, and for me, as you're going through this history lesson and walking through how it unfolded, when it happened, I'm always thinking of how there's parts of the advancement of software within it. And one thing I often wrestle with is how much has it really changed? Because the fundamentals don't ever seem to change or go away. But it seems like a lot of times people are out there like touting about how it actually has. And I think it's the same fundamentals, just in different viewpoints because of those other technological advancements. And it's something I constantly wrestle with because they seem to be in lockstep, but then every now and then you see that they're not. So how does this history of the evolution of CMMS and EAM, how does that unfold in your view?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I'll agree from a technical standpoint, software hasn't changed from the very early days when you look at the fundamental aspects of how programming works. But what has changed is all the abilities of what software can connect with. So really now we're talking the third and the fourth industrial revolutions where software was first introduced. But I mean, just the fact that we can easily connect to the physical world and harness data from a shop floor through these inexpensive sensors that can be even retrofit on an asset that might have been installed back in Ransom E. Olds automobile plant in the early 1900s. I literally have talked to manufacturers that have assets that, old machines that have been around for 50, 75 years, where you can retrofit a inexpensive sensor that wirelessly can broadcast data back to a computer, where the software can analyze and say, I'm detecting a vibration anomaly that might indicate that there's a maintenance issue with that particular asset. We better get a work order to get somebody over to fix that, because, well, we all know that unplanned downtime really hurts our operations, and we don't want that to happen. So underneath all of that is software for sure. But the data that is available now from all these different sources, be it the digital or physical world, and the things we can do as software developers, as software companies, Not only in terms of what we can show on our screens, but where we can see it, our mobile devices, in the field, or on vacation if we're dumb enough to look at our work orders that pop up when we're sitting on the beach somewhere. So the way we can reach people, the way we can analyze this data and the results. And at the end of the day, no matter what, all the industrial revolutions happen, technology is never about the sake of technology. Technology is there to solve a problem. Back in Ransom E. Old's day, when he was improving his assembly lines, he just needed a way to more cost effectively and safer build his cars where he could make a profit. His technology of making that assembly line really helped him. In modern era, in this fourth industrial revolution, we have really high operating costs, inflation, energy costs, labor has become more costly. It's hard to find workers with the aging workforce that is retiring. These are real problems that challenge manufacturers. So manufacturers don't implement technologies just because it's cool. They need a way to work around these uncontrollable problems. And these industrial revolutions and the manifestation in things like CMMS through AI and data can really help make those improvements. So your point is absolutely valid. It's just the ability to tie in with so many more things.
It's interesting as you're telling me that. I just had this thought, more of a question. I don't think I've asked you this previously. When it comes to the technology and the organizations that are developing these and delivering these, I'm curious about the importance of whether those individuals coming up with those ideas to solve these actual problems using technology like CMMS, how critically important is it, or is it not, that they've been in the trenches, done the work, or been around it with heavy exposure to it? And what I'm really asking is, do you need to be a true maintenance professional that's been a practitioner, that's been in there and done the work? Or could you be someone that hasn't done it, but you've seen it and you understand it from that alternate, slightly different perspective to then go and build a solution?
Very interesting debate. First off, if you've never been on a manufacturing floor and you are in the CMMS business, you will be, behind. I mean, you have to see it. You have to see and walk in the men and women's shoes that are working in those environments and see the challenges. You will have greater empathy for what their challenges are. You will be able to see a better solution. I'm all about fresh eyes. I think one of the biggest challenges with digital transformation, which digital transformation is this ubiquitous term that simply means looking at traditional challenges and opportunities. It's not all bad things. It's not all about how can we get more out of our team because we can't hire enough people. It's also about how can we scale our company so we can grow. Digital transformation looks at those opportunities and challenges, and then it tries to apply a technological solution to make those improvements. If you know the industry, if you've worked on a manufacturing plant floor, or at least spend some time there, it's going to be a lot easier for you to recognize the challenges and the opportunities and help design a solution. So the better, smarter, and probably more successful CMMS companies either have good manufacturing DNA in them. The founder, I did work in high school and beyond because my father owned a plastics manufacturing plant, and he had a company he built up. So I spent time there. I saw it in action. Do you have to? No, you will be better off if you do, because anytime you can really understand those challenges and opportunities and then find some sort of digital industry 4.0 solution to make it better, i.e. a better CMMS, it's only going to be better for the industry. And ultimately, it's going to be a stronger CMMS company as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think, I don't think we solved I don't think we solved the debate. I think it's a necessary ongoing discussion, uh, both because it's fascinating and at the same time, we want to help people navigate this journey. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we can give them the answers, but we can give them some clues and things to consider. I myself have been involved in technology, having been part of a company that you know about years ago that we eventually sold. And we based everything that we had done and built on what we were already doing in maintenance from a building and facilities perspective, building maintenance, building management, all that. And I think that's critically important to how a solution gets developed and built. But I also think that there are people with different minds, like you said earlier, different eyes, new set of eyes that can see ways to solve problems and do things that could actually work. And I don't think we should disqualify those individuals. I want to move into a different part of this kind of in brief history lesson. Did you have a comment on that, what I just said?
No, but I can piggyback, and I think we're starting to talk about the actual history of CMMS, because when you look at the history of CMMS, it really has been doing the same thing the whole time. I mean, if CMMS has been around since the 1960s, first off, punch cards, CMMS on IBM mainframes, only
Yeah.
by the largest of organizations, primarily governments. It was a lot of sort of defense type, very basic, but it was your first CMMS. And what were they doing? They were managing preventive and corrective maintenance on big ships. So the 1970s introduced computer terminals, replacing punch cards, expanded the use because now we had screens and keyboards, but still very basic. But again, keeping track of assets, preventive maintenance, corrective maintenance is largely was. The 70s into the 80s was when our first mini computers, those green screen terminals that I remember from my younger days, most people who are probably listening don't, but the green screens, again, that was progress. Then the 80s into the 2000s, where the personal computers came in, and that's where we really saw some big advancements in CMMS, which I'm going to go through some of those history of those companies a little later in the conversation. But networking capabilities were a big improvement there, where you could have multiple computers networked. And so it's a little bit more applicable to a larger organization, with at least within that one factory. And then in the 90s into 2010 was the first cloud-based, or internet-based, I should say. Weren't using the word cloud back then. Starting to shifting towards this SaaS model. And then finally, with this current era, which I think around 2010, really with the fourth industrial revolution and mobile devices, where you started seeing this modern crop of, it's the upkeeps, which were really the first mobile first, which was a brilliant move by the team over at Upkeep to create that. And a lot of people have followed suit, where the mobile first solution with those elegant UIs. For the most part, these things have been solving the same challenges as CMMS the whole time. Today, we've expanded primarily because the technology and with all the additional data, IoT, AI, but we're still doing the same thing. We're tracking our assets. We're trying to reduce downtime. We're trying to have good inventory control. We're trying to predictively anticipate when problems are going to happen and solve those problems. But the history of CMMS and EAM going back has been the challenges we're solving have been pretty similar.
That's it, and that's something that we may think we wrestle with, but that's not really going to change.
I
Like
don't think so either.
there's not some thing that we've overlooked for all this time when it comes to maintenance, maintenance management, maintenance and reliability best practices, facilities management. However, within each environment, there's going to be some nuanced differences in how we
For
accomplish
sure.
those same exact things, because if you lift something, well, maybe you lift something that's 10 pounds. Maybe you lift something that's 10,000 pounds, right? But it's the same general stuff that's happening when we approach this. And I think for me, I'm always looking at it from not just a data perspective, because we need to know what has happened, what is happening, what isn't happening, maybe what's going to happen. And I'm not talking about a crystal ball so much as something that gives us enough information to plan and schedule. But I think right now, what I'm probably wondering about and curious about is the depth. In other words, going beyond the surface of things like AI technology and whether that data that we're getting with our past, present, and future views is truly accurate. I think there's a lot happening where people are setting in motion their technology to manage these processes, and it might be faulty because the front line on the vendor side providing the solution might not have the understanding of what their client does, and then the client themselves may not really understand how to take what they do and digitize it. And some things can get lost in translation. I know that was a bunch of mumbo jumbo, but
No, it's not. It makes sense. And you're bringing up the most important point that I always recommend when I'm talking to, say, a manufacturer who picks my brain about we want to do more with, we want to do better. And we're thinking about implementing a CMMS. It's not about just implementing this technology. It's a couple things to your point. There's all kinds of nuances. We're obviously speaking in incredibly broad terms here, that different vendors have different capabilities and are doing cool and different things within this CMMS, whether it be in the manufacturing, industrial, or other sectors. And they all kind of have their different flavors, but it's the core elements that are similar. But if you're a if you're a manufacturer and you want to improve your operations, that's the right way to start. I tell you what's the wrong way to start, which I sometimes hear. You're a manufacturer that reaches out to me and says, "We're thinking about implementing a CMMS. What should we do?" And I always stop and say, "Well, why? Why do you want to implement the CMMS?" You really have to look back at what are the problems you're trying to solve and what are the opportunities you're trying to take advantage of. Because like you said, data is only good if it's going to help support you in one of those endeavors.
right.
If it's going to help you have better visibility into, well, why is my downtime happening? What can I do to make it better? Is this a team problem? Is it a procedure problem? Who knows? Is it a lack of preventive maintenance? There's so many questions that need to be answered where CMMS can really help. But you got to start with the real world problems and challenges and opportunities, and then work backwards from there on the technology. Again, that's what digital transformation is all about. And then when you start to identify those, then you can start to identify what is the right data we should be capturing. Is it in the physical world that we want to try to harness? Because just about every CMMS vendor today has some sort of IoT integration or physical world integration. But really, it comes down to identifying not just let's implement IoT, it's where are our sources of downtime and how can we use these sensors to try to catch it early, and how can that tie into our maintenance processes?
Interesting. Interesting. So I'm thinking about I've got a lot of friends in the industry, different parts of the industry, whether on the software side or in sensors, and they're maintenance and reliability practitioners. One of those friends, his name is Matthew Knuth, and we often have conversations unrecorded about IoT, sensor monitoring, condition monitoring is what we're really talking about. And one of the things that we often kind of call out is, yep, companies will sell their technology to another company and it'll be, 2,000 wireless sensors when we know good and well they need about 80 of them because they've only got 80 critical assets. And we just go round and round. And sometimes that can take this whole great discussion that we're having in a different direction. And it's a tough subject I'm bringing up because when we're technology providers, we're in business to solve problems, and for solving those problems, we make revenue, we employ people, and we make the world a better place. But there's things like harvesting and being able to make a profit and all that. So that's why I say I know that's kind of weird because we got to live on both sides. Customer is king, but businesses are in business to do business, drive value, add value, and then in some way, shape, or form harvest. And what I'm doing here is I'm taking our whole conversation and going, I want to talk about that M&A perspective that you mentioned briefly early on, because I think that's fascinating. And I think it helps people, whether they're clients of these organizations or they're employees at these organizations that provide CMMS platforms. That whole thing, I think it's important for people to have a general awareness from someone like you, how it unfolds in the world of mergers and acquisitions and what that is really all about.
It's a good point, and your point is really valid. And before I talk about the whole mergers and acquisitions side, which is an area that I do study in my day job these days, we're still early in this digital physical world. Industry 4.0 we're living right now, we're still a bit early, and I think a lot of things are going to have to shake out to where it becomes. It's kind of like mobile device. It's kind of like mobile devices. It was for 10 years I was trying to get people to use our mobile version when I first created it a long time ago, and it takes a while to adopt. I have this little sort of thought exercise I go to as we're starting to think about Industry 5.0, and
Mm.
um, and I'll throw this little thought exercise at you that I often do when I lecture on this topic. I'm going to go back 2.5 million years ago for the beginning of this, which you don't probably normally hear on this podcast, on this vlog. But 2.5 million, and I'm illustrating this heady example of the compression of time. As human-like creatures have been on this planet for about 2.5 million years. These are very rough numbers. Any anthropologists listening, please don't message me. These are rough numbers. For about 2.5 million years, 200,000 years ago, us, Homo sapien, 200 to 300,000 years ago, that's when we started to show up. About 10,000 years ago, the agricultural revolution, also called the Neolithic revolution, is when we moved from hunter-gatherers to establishing societies, villages, towns, cities. So we started talking millions, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands. This is where it gets crazy. The first industrial revolution was only 240 years ago. 60 years ago since the first mainframe computer, 50 since the first usable personal computer in business, 41 since the birth of the internet, 17 years since the first iPhone. This compression of time and the technology that has changed in that amount of time is mind-boggling. We've never comprehended this as humans on this planet. So on one hand, you have this new technology that's hitting us all the time, but it slowly but surely does get adopted. Mobile, cloud. Everybody fought cloud at first. You and I, we heard it all the time. Now try to go the other way. Mobile devices, they fought us. So IoT sensors, the intersection of the digital physical world is happening and will only become more ingrained, easier to use, and people will be smarter about purchasing, using it, and the CMMS vendors about how they incorporate it into their technology. And this is all leading into this fifth industrial revolution. Moore's law, if you're not familiar, is that every 2 years technology doubles and the cost of it gets cut in half. And so it's this exponential increase in the speed at which these technologies are being created. We're already talking about Industry 5.0 in the 2030s. So the first couple of industrial revolutions were 100 years apart. Now we're not even barely a decade, 15, 20 years apart. What's happening, though, is the technology is going to continue to improve, but I think that it's also going to leverage humans to be able to use the technology more intelligently, side by side. You hear the phrase cobots, where robots and humans work side by side in a factory. AI is going to be taken to the next level. And in fact, the fifth industrial revolution will include things like AI, biotechnology, quantum computing. Internet of Things will be there for sure, but it's going to help us with sustainability. It's going to help us with a whole nother level of predictive maintenance. Augmented reality, virtual reality. I thought that was going to be a 4.0, Industry 4.0 fourth. I think that's going to, because the goggles and everything are just not catching up. That's probably going to be closer to fifth. But there's all these amazing technologies. A long answer to your point you're making there, that adoption takes time. The industry has to play with how they put it out there. We as users, the people in the manufacturing floors, will make mistakes at first, but we will get better at it the same way we've learned how to use our mobile devices. So Industry 5.0 and this evolution, it's all the natural process that every industrial revolution before us, society, the workforce, the owners of these businesses have to figure it out. I'm going to pause right there, but does that resonate at all?
It it does. And you know, for us, for anyone, these are actually really big conversations that we're trying to focus in on. And if we want to go big picture, it's really big, like unfathomably big when we look at this. And to talk about something like Industry 5.0, which I rarely talk about because I'm so concerned that, everybody else is really in the 3 and the 4.0 kind of
They are.
area. And the other thing is, as technology advances and different organizations get better and better at what they do, what they produce, what they make, and they don't sacrifice quality, maybe they improve quality, and then all this, it's all over the place. There are manufacturing facilities that have minimal technology in place to do what they do, and they do it extremely well, and they don't need to improve that. And then there's others that are so advanced in their ability to continually improve, continual process improvement, that that's all they do day in, day out, because they're that dialed in. And then there's everything in between. So that's why I say this is such a big picture type thing, or such a big concept that we talk about. And we're not going to resolve it. We're going to keep the conversation going.
That's
It,
all
it
we can do. And we'll be talking about it hopefully in the sixth industrial revolution as well, because it's all about solving problems. And to your other point earlier, the investment market, um, obviously it's been a crazy time. Especially you study this field. You're talking to these CMMS founders all the time. Um, because it has been such a crazy improvement we've seen with all these companies. There's a lot of discussion about where is industry going, but at the end of the day, whether you use a lot of technology or not, and you can be successful, kudos to you. If you are going to be in a highly competitive manufacturing environment, if you're a manufacturer that's reshoring plants back to the US with a high operating cost, you typically will fare better if you implement smartly these technologies to solve those problems. But I wanted to continue the conversation on what, like, from the investment community, to bring it back to your original point there. But it's been an incredibly exciting time. I personally went through it because as I said at the beginning, I was a founder. Um, I actually put together some data here that I have a little list. And I only went back to IBM acquisition of Maximo. Now,
okay.
Maximo you hear Maximo all the time. Maximo actually was founded in 1968. The company was called PSDI, started to be called Maximo in 1985, rebranded as MRO Software. That's how I'm an old timer. I knew him as MRO Software. IBM bought him in 2006. That's the same year, if you remember, DataStream. I don't know if you remember DataStream. DataStream was the first real client server. They were 70,000 implementations of DataStreams. MP2 was their product. They were acquired by Infor in 2006. So in the 2000s, those were the two big acquisitions. Fast forward to the 2010s, and there was a flurry of activity. Dude Solutions was acquired by a private equity firm, Warburg Pincus. That started this whole cycle we're seeing of private equity investing in the sector. Fluke acquired eMate in 16. Dude Solutions bought my company in 2017 that we talked about. Accruent bought Maintenance Connection in 2018. Fortive then went and bought Accruent that same year, Fortive being a large conglomerate. Manager Plus Hippo was acquired by iOffice in 2019. By the way, all this information is press releases. I'm not giving away anything that's secret. This is all from press releases. Dude Solutions was acquired by Clearlake again in 2019. Rockwell bought Fix in 2020. 2021, MaintainX got a huge funding from Bessemer Venture. And then Infor sold their EAM to Hexagon. But it just keeps going. Just keeps going. TMA, through investments, acquired Eagle, Prime, and Max Panda in the 22-23. And then finally, the last one on the list is 2022, when Siemens acquired Brightly, which was my old one. I didn't mention Upkeep and Limble. There are another two companies that you know very well that took big investments as well. It's just been this sort of cycle where a lot of news has gone into these investments in these companies. Now, you can take the stance that, oh, is this a good thing? I was on both sides. And if you are a CMMS founder, CEO, and you want to grow your company, it's hard. If you don't have the funding, it takes a lot longer. And when you think about that compression of time concept that we talked about, if you want to be competitive, look at the way Limble, Maintainx, Upkeep have grown in, relatively speaking, very short periods of time. If you compare that to the data streams or the Bigfoot CMMS days, where it took us 15 years to get there, to where these companies have already probably surpassed. And investments in these, it's a natural process that happens. And it's absolutely a natural thing across all technology industries. I think the CMMS and the EAM sector is one where it's just been a lot of it, because the value proposition, you and I both know, because it's foundational to all the conversations you have. You got downtime problems, you got inventory problems, you don't know where your assets are, you need a CMMS. Everybody needs a CMMS. So the excitement in that space has garnered excitement in the and this happens with every technology revolution, every industrial revolution. When you look at the players in the space when those phases happen, investments get made. So at the end of the day, it helps these companies grow more sustainably. For some perspectives, it might be challenging because these companies change, but it is a natural evolutionary process.
Yeah, and you and I have had several conversations about this, considering some of our mutual, similar in some ways, experiences being, founders or co-founders, or in those early days of developing a solution, finding market fit, really driving that value. And then as you're moving along and you're bringing people in, this is one of those things that you happen to know. And anybody that knows me knows that I will gripe about it. I will say,
Yeah,
"Oh, I
rightfully
don't like."
so, Greg.
Yeah,
Everybody,
of course.
rightfully so.
And the better way, though, is for people, everyone, to have this awareness that, if you have a CMMS provider, if you have a piece of technology that someone's delivering for you, it could be EAM, and it's great, and they're really taking care of you. They're a company that needs to continue to thrive, as are you. And for their future to exist, or for them to continue to grow, they need more funding, more opportunity. And that's one of those things that, as much as it can be disruptive, it is necessary. And I think there's kind of a sweet spot where you can kind of be in the middle and go, well, is this technology we're delivering? Let's pretend we're CMMS founders again. Well, we're going to build this CMMS and it's going to do this, and this. We're not going to change it all that much because it's based on this philosophy, this methodology. We know it works. It resonates with this group, drives value for them. Everybody's happy. And what have we just done? We've created a lifestyle company. Now, a lifestyle company, as a technology provider, still will require some form of what we call harvesting, right? And if you're not going to grow super fast, which we've seen these companies, you already mentioned it, in the last 5, 6, 8 years, just way faster, way bigger, faster technology development, those are the ones that really need that money. But if you're on the lifestyle side, you still are going to eventually get your company in a position where someone's going to come try to buy you. They're going to love what you're doing. But what we have to understand and accept somehow, some way, is that's a natural eventuality. that we have to accept, and it's going to change. Things are going to change. Nothing stays the same.
Yeah, your points are 100% valid, and there are good investors and there are not so good. First off, if you are a CMMS owner, you are probably, and I guarantee you, any CMMS owner who's listening to this is inundated with inquiries from investment companies, private equity or strategic investors. It's crazy right now. And my advice to them, and this is my day job. This is where I work for a software equity group, and we help software companies, not just CMMS, lots of different types of SaaS technology companies go to market. You need to focus on growing a strong, solid business. I mean, and focus, keep your eye on the ball to do that. If and when you're ready to take an investment, that's where you want to be talking to the right types of investors that understand not only your business, but understand the sector and can figure out a way to collaboratively build a sustainable plan for the next version of your company. And as a founder, you should have options. You should be able to say, I've had fun building it to this point. Maybe I want to go off and sail into the sunset. Or maybe I'm just getting started and I just need the fuel to grow this business to the next level. And I want that type of a partner who is in alignment with me and how I want to run this organization. You have that power as a CMMS company. And if you're talking to the right, and that's what we do, we help connect a CMMS company with those right types of investors. I don't want that to be a story that's negative later in life for
Right.
the owner or for the customers of that owner. And I am proof that it can be done the right way. I built up my lifestyle company. I sold it to an awesome company, and Dude Solutions. Kent Hudson was the owner, founder back then Brightly. And every one of the leadership regimes I worked with there, they're all amazing. It was great. And then the Siemens era, I'm proof it can be done right. I think more people could tell a positive story if they approach that right. And again, that's what I do for my day job. If it's done wrong, it's just a negative experience, and that doesn't serve anybody at all. So I think it's just a matter of, you and I have been around the block a couple of times. You do things right wrong a few times. You figure out how to do it right, and that's what wisdom is. So.
Or you go back for more, glutton for punishment. That's I I love identifying a problem, finding a solution, and not applying it. I'm making a joke, kind of making fun of myself, but this is what we see in this whole big bad world of maintenance management, software, SaaS solutions. There's challenges every single day. There's problems. They're gonna come up. They're gonna happen, and yeah, you want to be a pit bull and find your way through it that way. All good, but you gotta sometimes take a step back and remove the emotion of these changes. For me, it was very difficult to see some of these solutions get acquired and then go away too quickly through neglect. But then I've seen, like in your story and a couple of other ones, where when they get to this next level and money comes in and it's kind of the right kind of a setup, and customers are still thriving and they get to keep growing. I love that, but that's not an easy thing. And I think everyone is too quick, just like we quickly advance now and we quickly move to these next industrial revolutions. Everything is moving at hyper speed. And to say
Yeah, there's
that
no doubt.
does not even convey it. It's insanity. That's how I like to describe it. It's just bonkers. And this stuff is really hard to do. And I'm going to use an analogy that might not land, but movies. Okay. A lot of people like movies. They go to movies, and then imagine how difficult it is to make a movie. Then imagine how difficult it is to get the ensemble, the cast, and all the elements to come together and be phenomenal and resonate. Incredibly rare. Everybody thinks it's not rare, but it's incredibly rare. And look at how much money and how many people are involved. Well, I'm using that to be analogous with how software works, who it touches, who it serves, and how this whole thing is constantly like an interplay of all these different things. Maybe I'm a little too, what would we call that, philosophical or existential about it, but that's the reality. And I struggle to accept it, but I love to talk about it and tell people, hey, here's a good way to look at it. And that's one of the things that I like about having you on, Paul, is you've got that, what I see as the healthy, very adult like outlook on what's possible, as opposed to, people that might get stuck. So I don't know what
Your
this just
analogy is
became.
excellent. I think at the end of the day, whether you're making a movie or you're building a software company or you're running a manufacturing plant, first off, be a good communicator. Focus on what your challenges and opportunities are. Involve as many people in that conversation to really get at the heart of it. Use technology where you can to give you relief or to help you take advantage of those. These are, you could insert that into making a movie, building a house, or building a software company. Are my fundamental rules that I like to go by. And maybe I'm being a little too esoteric or philosophical there, but we got two philosophical esoteric guys talking to one another. I just, I have a very positive outlook on this, and it's never going to change. Just like CMMS is never going to change. We're always going to be fixing things. We're always going to be hopefully predictively or prescriptively fixing them. These conversations about mergers and acquisitions in the sector and the challenges, Industry 4.0, 5.0, there'll be a whole new crop of companies doing it. So
Oh yeah.
history, to tie this back to the whole point of our conversation today, has often repeats itself. And we're just living in this amazing time right now in the middle of this industrial revolution. And it's all new and different. And, it will settle right in time for the next one to start.
Yeah. And I hope we get an opportunity to talk about that
Yeah,
when
we
it
will.
does,
We
as
will.
long as we recognize it. Paul, as always, thank you for joining me on CMMS Radio. And I really think this will help some people. And at a minimum, we know it'll be entertaining. Can't wait to do it again.
Thanks, Greg. It's always a pleasure to be here. You have an awesome day.
Thank you. You too. Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.